Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank you all for joining us today. This is our first virtual webinar, and we're going to be having more coming up. So first of all, we want to say we hope you're safe and staying well in this environment. Again, thanks for joining us. My name is Ralph Biederman, and I'm the Executive Director of the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce here in Mid-America. And I'm going to see if I can get there we go. Okay, so our chamber is a truly binational chamber. We have headquarters in both Washington, D.C. and Mexico City. The purpose of the chamber has been to build mutually beneficial trade and investment relationships between Mexico and the U.S. We were incorporated in 1973 as a 501c6 nonprofit corporation. And today we have 20 chapters, 10 in the US and 10 in Mexico, with a total membership of over 550 companies and organizations. We do have a large number of groups and task forces which take place from time to time, such as the North American Working Group, comprised of members that review and analyze trade issues and then provide recommendations to appropriate agencies of the government in both countries. A little bit of what we're proud of: since May of 2017, the chapter has held 13 breakfast series sessions with members and friends to openly discuss trade issues and their impact on their organizations, especially NAFTA II, which then became the US-Mexico Canada Agreement on July 1st, just a few weeks ago. Since COVID-19, of course, we've provided many updates on issues in a virtual setting to our growing group of concerned individuals in the Chicagoland area. And certainly you can check us out on our website, especially our resources page, where we load documents, reports, analyses, both having to do with COVID-19 and also to do with trade and investment in general. I mean, we cover areas other than US-Mexico trade. We cover still to be formulated new trade agreements with the EU and the UK and with Japan, and of course some of the trade issues that we've had with Canada. So anyway, it is important with our first webinar today to look a little bit on what is happening in the geography between the United States and Mexico. You know, what is happening to the two countries with COVID, both from a healthcare and also an economic basis. What is happening with trade and investment with Mexico, both for companies that are already in Mexico and those that are still considering Mexico. And it's fortunate for us to have with us today Alberto Villarreal, who is a member of our chapter and the managing director of NEPA NOAA. And he is engaged in what we call transformational activities, but looking at it in more generic terms, seeking to help companies become bigger, better, stronger, all in a positive manner. And now is time to start looking at that, because hopefully coronavirus will not be with us forever. And even though trade and investment with Mexico is down, there's still a lot of opportunities there, but there's also a lot of challenges. So right now, I'd like to turn it over to Alberto. If you have any questions going forward, you can click on chat and ask questions. Right now, let me get over to you, Alberto, and
so we can share a screen.
You're now the host.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us, Ralph. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with the members and, of course, the audience of the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce Mid-America chapter. And thank you as well for that kind introduction. I am Alberto Villarreal, and that's in Spanish. In English, it's Alberto Villarreal. I respond well to either one of those names. And I am the managing director of NEPA NOAA Transformation Advisory. What we do at NEPA NOAA is that we help multinational businesses implement change in their operations in the United States, Mexico, and of course, Latin America. And it goes both ways. It's for Latin American businesses operating in the United States, as well as North American businesses operating south of the border. And today, let me share my screen. Today, we're going to be talking about the post-COVID-19 priorities, or should I say present priorities and future priorities from a business, people, and technology perspective. And also, how does Mexico fit into that future? So without further ado, let's begin. And I apologize if there's a dog barking. I hope that it stops soon. So what are the objectives of today's session? First, we need to understand the immediate future. Every time Nepanua partners with one of our clients, we look at it from three different perspectives. We'll look at it from a business perspective, how that change impacts the business in and of itself. We take a look at it from a people perspective, how that change impacts our clients, but also the people working for that company. And third, and very important, every change nowadays needs to be driven by a technological component. So whenever we look at any project, we'll look at it from those three perspectives. So today, we're going to be analyzing the immediate future from those three perspectives. After defining how the immediate future looks like, we're going to identify how Mexico fits into this future. And then finally, we're going to provide a perspective on the US-Mexico relationship going forward. So let's begin with the business piece. Right now, there are three types of businesses. You have businesses that are on life support, you have businesses that are surviving, and you have others that, believe it or not, are thriving. So when we take a look at the actions of this set of businesses, we see that the actions are different because their objectives right now are different. So which businesses are on life support? We all heard that Brooks Brothers filed for bankruptcy. We all heard that Macy's filed for bankruptcy. Retail businesses are struggling. Restaurants and bars. 60,000 restaurants and bars have closed and will not open again. Arts and entertainment. You're speaking to a season ticket holder for the Chicago Fire here at Soldier Field. I was looking forward to take my wife and my two kids to the games. We haven't been able to do that, right? Arts and entertainment, concerts, they're struggling. Education, as we knew it, as we all were educated, they're struggling. And of course, air travel and hospitality services. These types of businesses, and of course, there are exceptions to them, are on life support. Businesses that are on life support, they're taking three actions. They're either selling, closing, right? They're in the wait and see mode. And some of them are innovating. At Nepanua, we believe that any business, regardless of which state you're in, if you're in a wait and see mode, you're just waiting for this to pass without taking any actions, it's very probable that you will fail. And you will hear me repeat this throughout the presentation. Next, you have the businesses that are surviving, that are getting by. What type of businesses are in this bucket? We have construction businesses, we have professional services, attorneys, consultants, accounting, finance. We have banks, we have insurance company, we have manufacturing. Of course, there are some essential industries, right, in manufacturing that are really in this bucket, in the thriving bucket. There are others that are surviving. And then you have utilities. And the actions by the businesses in this bucket right now, throughout the pandemic, in a crisis, are five. We have some of them that are in the wait and see mode. As I mentioned before, these ones, they're at risk. We have others that they're getting fit. And what do we mean by getting fit? They're getting rid of the fat, right? They're really focused on what they're good at, going back to their core businesses and focusing on them. Perhaps there are some layoffs there. Perhaps there are some automation efforts going on, and they are getting fit. They are diversifying. And when we talk about diversifying, we mean diversifying from a market perspective, but also from an operational perspective. They're exploring new customers. And I have the story here of a business called QB, which is literally a bike for you to pedal while you work. It's under your desk. It's a very small bike. And their initial intention was to go after the younger people that want to stay at home and get fit. But they realized after going into the market that it's actually the other way around. Actually, the older generation is the one that's purchasing their products. So they're diversifying their market. And you also have the businesses that are actually diversifying their operations and looking into Mexico, right? To diversify their supply chain and be able to manage risk that way. Of course, cash is king. That's a basic principle of business. But liquidity nowadays has become, if not the most important, among the most important pieces of a business. You have businesses struggling to find liquidity, going to banks asking for money, or selling some of their assets that perhaps are not priority. Managing risk for the people that we have in the audience. I mean, before, perhaps you were planning on a quarterly basis, right? You had a 5-year plan. You spent time doing an annual budget and an annual plan, just to realize that in 2020, in February, you threw them to the trash. Now, you're actually planning on a weekly, monthly basis, right? Because things are moving so quickly. So these businesses, they're focused on managing risk. And finally, they're innovating. And we're going to touch on innovating when we get to the technology piece of what's currently happening right now. But they're focused on innovating. They're focused on growing. Finally, we have the third bucket, those businesses that are actually thriving. Industrial real estate. In Mexico, for example, it's booming. We don't have enough parks for all the businesses that are going down there. Online groceries and retailers. Now, even my mother purchases her groceries online. Last mile logistics to support this online groceries and retailers. E-learning. We're going to give you the example of Coursera in a little bit. People, they want to stay engaged. They want to upskill themselves. And of course, telehealth. We can't go to the hospital. We can't visit our doctors. Well, we might as well just visit them virtually like we're doing this Zoom session. And same as the surviving businesses, the behaviors that the thriving businesses are taking into consideration are diversification, both of market and operations, liquidity, managing risk, innovation, but more importantly, these two. And these are the businesses that are actually helping the economy, lessen the downward spiral that it's been in. Some of them are hiring and many of them are acquiring other businesses. So these actions is how we have divided the actions of businesses. This bucket is how we have divided the actions of businesses during the pandemic. And we expect these behaviors to continue over the next 12 to 24 months. Now let's talk about people. And here, the key point of this is that these behaviors are not new. And the point to say that they're not new is that there were companies that were actually heavily invested in these behaviors before the pandemic. And this actually helped them thrive during the pandemic. And after we get into technology, we're going to sum it all up and you'll see where we're going with this. But when we think of the behaviors that people have adopted in the pandemic, well, not adopted, but actually accelerated, the behaviors that have accelerated among many people throughout the pandemic, we first see that remote learning has had a tremendous growth. And we look at Coursera, for example, who has 60 million users. And by the way, Coursera is a company that was founded in 2012. This is 8 years ago. It was founded 8 years ago because they saw this trend of online learning, of providing higher level education, of upskilling people on things that perhaps universities were not prepared to do. They were very agile. They could really release a course very quickly versus the regular university. Well, they've added 14 million users in the past 5 months. Guess what? I'm actually a user of Coursera. I have taken 3 courses over the last 5 months in Coursera. Great product. Telehealth. When we look at Modern Health, which is a company that provides services to corporations for the overall wellness of their employees, we're talking about access to psychologists, we're talking about access to doctors, we're talking about access to meditation programs, access to workout programs. This is a fairly new company starting in 2017, and they raised 31 million just in 2020. And the spike that they've seen in the usage of their application over the last 5 months has been tremendous. We also see the behavior of at-home fitness. Right now, at least in Chicago, we can go out for a walk, we can go out for a jog. This morning I went out for a jog, always wearing a mask. But at-home fitness really spiked. And we know the story of Peloton, right? The bikes that you have at home. But Peloton right now actually has a wait time of 10 weeks if you want to get a new bike. 10 weeks, that's ridiculous. Whereas before, you would get it in 2 weeks at the most, 10 weeks to get a bike. But the example that we have here is Mirror. And Mirror, as its name entails, it's literally a mirror that you have at home and guides you through different types of workouts. Well, they were just acquired by Lululemon, an athleisure brand, in $500 million. And Mirror was a company that started in 2016. So they had been investing in this behavior of at-home fitness for 4 years already. Not during the pandemic, but actually 4 years ago. I'm going to jump into the future of work. And I'm sure that all of you have talked and have listened to different presenters on the future of work. But now we have actually added a little wrinkle there. It's the future of work at home, right? Because before we were like, okay, future of work, you're going to get to your office and you're going to hotel. You're not going to have a phone. You're going to have a cell phone. Video conferences, yeah, it's growing, but it's, really hasn't taken, the popularity that was expected. But nowadays, what you have is people saying, you know what, I'm never taking a day trip again. If I'm just going to have to fly somewhere for one meeting, I'm going to take it via Zoom, right? And now, what does this mean for the architecture of companies, right? The technology piece. I mean, many companies were not prepared to have all their employees working from home. What does this mean to the organizational structure of businesses? How many people do you actually need? I saw a very interesting graph about on month 2 or 3. It was actually month 3 of the pandemic, where the presenter asked the audience, how many hours are you working? And instead of seeing a regular curve where you have 7, 8 hours as the mean, we had a U-shaped curve because people were working either 4 hours or less or 10 hours or more, which tells you that actually you have a lot of wasted time right there in the middle. The people that are driving the businesses are still driving them even during the pandemic, right? And others that perhaps were occupying a full-time role, well, they're doing their job. It just happens that it takes them 2 or 3 hours to do their job, not 8 as you thought, right? So when we put all this into consideration, we think of businesses like Zoom, the platform that we're using to guide this conversation. Zoom, it actually was founded in 2011. I started using Zoom 5 years ago. And I will never forget because the first time I got a Zoom meeting, I was like, what is this? Why don't you just call me, right? And I remember that my client at the time explained to me, Alberto, I like it because it's very easy to use and I can record. So at the time, that was the key, right? It was like, well, we can record a conversation. I was like, all right, sounds good. And then, over the years, Zoom started growing. And of course, there's Microsoft Teams, you have Hangouts, but the reason that Zoom has grown so much is because it's so easy to use. It's so user-friendly. Well, last month, Zoom announced that right now they're having 300 million users on a daily basis participate in Zoom calls. This is tremendous growth. Once again, a business that saw behavior that was happening and simply during the pandemic, it was accelerated. And then finally, we go into e-commerce. And the reason that we don't use Amazon as an e-commerce example is because we all know about the success of Amazon, right? But now we're going to use Wayfair. In Wayfair, it's actually the oldest of the companies on this list. Wayfair was founded in 2002. I have very dear friends from business school working at Wayfair, and I am very happy for the success that they are having right now. Wayfair actually, they actually bet on the behavior that I'm sorry, they actually bet on the opportunity of people buying furniture without ever seeing it, buying furniture online. So they looked at the Amazon landscape and they said, okay, what does Amazon do? Well, Amazon sells pretty much everything, right? What don't they sell? Well, furniture. So before Amazon started selling furniture, Wayfair started selling furniture, right? And they have seen a growth of 150% this year. And Wayfair is a very agile organization and really, really, really uses technology to their advantage. About 3 years ago, we bought a couch from Wayfair. And I will never forget that we used augmented reality. I didn't know it was augmented reality at the time, but then when I studied it, I was like, oh, this is augmented reality. So if you're ever in the Wayfair app, and there are many companies now that do this, and you want to buy a mirror per se, you can select the mirror and point the camera of your cell phone to the wall, and it will show you how the mirror looks in that wall. It will tell you if it fits. It will tell you if it matches the color of your house. And then you can make a better decision. Well, what happens with e-commerce is that usually e-commerce, it was targeted mostly for millennials and younger, right? Millennials, centennials. Well, now everybody, we were forced into buying electronically, right? So Wayfair was one of the businesses that benefited from this. Before we get into the technology supporting these behaviors and the business actions, are you starting to notice a trend? And the trend that we're trying to put in place here, it's the businesses that are actually failing or that are on life support. Not all retail businesses are failing. Not all restaurants are failing. Definitely not all education companies are failing. Air travel, that's a different story. But this, I mean, the businesses that are actually failed is because they failed to ignore, they failed to acknowledge these behaviors that were up and coming, right? These behaviors that people were already demonstrating. And the proof that these behaviors were already happening is that none of these companies are new. None of them are new. They have all been around at least for 4 years, already investing into these behaviors. They're already investing into the technology that support these behaviors. And that allows them to be growing and thriving right now. So now let's look into the key piece of the puzzle, because we can talk all we want about business actions. We can talk all we want about behaviors, you know, and have a 2-hour-long debate of the behaviors that people will have right now or in the future. But in the end, the tools that are supporting this is the technology. And I loved this survey that The Economist did. It states, which of the following will be most important to your firm's recovery? And if this question was asked in December of 2019 or in January of 2020, I can guarantee you that the results would have been completely upside down. Internet of Things would have been in top. Artificial intelligence, machine learning would have been in top. RPA, I think it's still on top. 5G, remember 5G? We haven't spoken about 5G in 5 months. Literally, we haven't spoken about 5G. And at the end of 2019, 5G was the knees beast, right? Was the bee's knees. Yeah, it's like we were also enthused about how fast we were going to be working with 5G. Well, guess what? We're going back to basics in a certain way. Cybersecurity has become tremendously important because of the volume of people that are now working from home. We need to train our employees so that they don't fall into the traps of letting someone into the system. Do we have the right software, the right antivirus that will help us against cybersecurity threats? Do we have the right forensic software that will help us determine how were we hacked and how can we resolve it? Data privacy, security, cloud, businesses that weren't in the cloud, they wish they were in the cloud. Now, on-premise is pretty much gone, right? We're talking about AWS, we're talking about Google Cloud, we're talking about Oracle, SAP. Businesses need to be in the cloud. If you're not in the cloud, collaboration becomes much more difficult, especially in these days. We talk about risk management technology. Technology that will help us plan better, technology that will help us take care of our assets better, technology that will help us predict better. And of course, customer experience. Because the customer experience has changed dramatically. Our customer journey is simply not the same anymore. I hope that all of you have tried to do anything outside. For example, taking the dog out for a bath and a haircut, it's completely different. Now you cannot even go into the store. Somebody has to come out. They take the leash. You pay remotely with your cell phone. It has drastically changed. And that's just a very simple example, right? And that's why I share it, because it's common for everybody. Now, what did impress me about the survey is that there are no technologies that are not relevant. Usually when you do one of these surveys, you have 3, 4, 5 technologies where people are like, okay, this is really important. But if you look at the results, you see that all of them are above 25%, which means that the people that were taking the survey, literally, they checked every box. That tells us 2 things. Number one, we know what's going to be driving the future. Number two, I don't think people really understand what each one of these technologies do, or the gap between businesses and where they should be to thrive on a technology platform, on a technology basis, from a technology perspective, is very wide. So let me repeat that. Businesses, the gap between businesses and the level of technology that businesses need to have to thrive in the future is very wide. That's why you see that all of them are important. So right now, it's time to rethink the IT strategy and architecture to support the new human behaviors and to support the actions that businesses must make to survive and or thrive. In the post-pandemic world, it's pretty much up for grabs. Things will continue to evolve in the near future, but businesses must analyze it from these three perspectives: people, and technology. And I'm not saying that there's a clear path forward, because there isn't. But what it is we do have clear signs of how things are evolving. And actually, these signs, specifically people and technology, these signs, they were there at least 5 years ago, at least 4 years ago. And the businesses that are struggling the most right now are those ones that literally ignored these signs, or they decided that they were not core to their business. So during a crisis, these behaviors were accelerated. And those businesses that were ready, that were agile enough to be on top, well, they continue to be on top and they're thriving. Well, Alberto, that's great. Thank you very much for telling us about business, people, technology. We love it. So what? Well, before we dive into the Mexico piece, I just want to leave you with one quote. During a crisis, businesses that aim to only survive will fail. And I don't mean that they will fail immediately, but their competitors and new companies will aim to actually transform and drive the future. And they will fail eventually. So businesses that aim to transform and drive the future will thrive. This time in crisis mode, specifically if you are in these two buckets, you should be focused on transforming. You should be focused on innovating. You should be focused on trying to predict the future and changing your business so that it thrives afterwards. If your business is on life support, well, let's try to make the best of it, liquidate, but also, if you can, innovate to save it. But right now, it's the time to innovate. Right now, it's the time to transform. Right now, it's a time to change. Taking into consideration the actions, behaviors, and technology that we just discussed. Okay, Alberto. So how does Mexico play a role into all of this? In the end, we're in a presentation at the US-Mexico Chamber of Commerce. And here's where Mexico plays a role. And I love this. I'm very passionate about this, because the Mexico that we know from 25, 30 years ago has completely changed. And I think that USMCA really reflects that. So first, let's talk about business. As you know, Mexico is the largest trading partner of the United States. And the numbers that we have here of $309 billion, that was up to 2019. This year, of course, it's going to be different because we are going through the most important crisis of the modern era. But we also see that the second trading partner, which is China, it's actually, well, the relationship there, it's actually not the best. So when we look at what Mexico can offer, I will never say, leave China and come to Mexico. No, because I believe in the globalized economy. I believe in the globalized world. But given the current circumstances, Mexico does provide a good option for businesses that were working with Chinese suppliers to actually manage risk from a supply chain perspective, but also to have a regionalized operations. And the ecosystem is already there. Mexico is the largest trading partner with the United States. On a cost perspective, Mexican workers earn 4 to 5 times less than American workers. I'm not going to say that Mexico will compete with China on a cost basis, not at all. But I think that Mexico does bring other things into the table that are listed in this slide, actually, apart from cost. Location, south of the border. We are literally one flight away as soon as we can start flying again in between countries. And it becomes imperative when you look into risk management and when you look into actually understanding what is happening. The transparency piece right now has been very important for businesses, really to understand what's going on in your operations or with your suppliers. It's key to be able to re-engage in business. It's very difficult to be calling or to be trying to reach, your partners in other geographies and not being able to get a response or not being able to get a clear response of what is going to happen. And I think that Mexico proved that they collaborated with the United States to open the essential industries together and looked into the problem together and said, okay, how can we actually collaborate for us to move forward together? And also USMCA. I know that USMCA for some businesses is tough because it actually makes businesses comply with new rules of the game. But on the other hand, I also understand why the US, Canada, and Mexican governments worked together and released USMCA, TMEC in Mexico, CUSMA in Canada during the pandemic. Because this was actually a pause that it's unfortunate, but it's a pause that happened. And if we had already agreed on the new rules of the game, well, let's come back and let's work together with the new rules to re-engage, to have an economic recovery under the new rules. And after reading the agreement and after being in many, many, many conversations, guiding some of them, giving others, I do believe that this is a great agreement between the three nations that will help all of them from a markets perspective, from an operation perspective, from a labor perspective. I do believe that this agreement makes North America a stronger region in the world landscape. Now let's talk about the people in Mexico. Well, one of the main behaviors that we saw during the pandemic is remote work. So Mexico plays two roles here. The first one is that now you can hire people pretty much anywhere in the world, depending on their capabilities. And Mexico, thankfully, has many capable people willing to work for international companies. There's a saying in Mexico that it's if Mexicans worked for Mexican companies the way Mexicans work for international companies, it would be a different country. And it's actually the case. Whenever Mexicans start working for international companies, the production goes up. The efficiency is tremendous, right? So when we put all of this together, we talk about remote work, we talk about talent. Mexico graduates 130,000 engineers. We provide to the agricultural industry in the United States more than 1 million jobs every year, right? When we think of culture, still it's the North American culture. It's easy to work with Mexicans in Mexico if you're an American company, because Mexicans are used to collaborating with North American companies. And when you think of e-commerce, when Mexico has experienced the greatest e-commerce growth in the world over the last 5 months, like, okay, we can work there. So that's the first piece. We have the talent, we have the culture, we're really technology savvy. And right now you can work with people over there. But the second piece is, and this I just learned about this recently, a couple of friends that work at Facebook, they're actually moving to Cancun. They said, you know what? I'm in San Francisco. Facebook had told me that I'm not going to come back to the office. I'm keeping my salary and I'm just moving to Cancun, right? Go figure. So that's also another option that Mexico provides to businesses in North America. Apart from hiring people directly in Mexico, now it really doesn't matter where you sit. So that brings important business benefits, but also well-being benefits for employees, for the people that work in our companies, right? They can be sitting wherever. I'll tell you, the Nepanoa team, we have people in Mexico City, we have people in Monterrey, we have people in Guadalajara. We were born remote. We never intended to have an office. And this just happened to us. And we're like, okay, well, I guess we're a step ahead of the game. because we never intended to have a physical location, and we meet every day, right? But that's where Mexico plays a role from the people perspective. And finally, from the technology perspective, we discussed architecture, we discussed IT capabilities, we discussed cybersecurity, and we discussed cloud. Well, how can Mexico play a role here? We already told you that we graduate 130,000 engineers a year. And this is software development, this is industrial engineers, aerospace, chemical engineers, right? So we have talent there. We know that people speak English in Mexico. So now let's go a little bit into the location, right? Guadalajara, Querétaro, they have created digital cities, literally digital cities for companies, not only North American, for companies in the world to come and employ the people in their towns to be software developers, to be designers, to provide customer service, online customer service, I'm sorry. And the result has been a very good one. I don't know if you've heard the name of Bismarck Lepe. Bismarck, he's an entrepreneur. He's based in San Francisco, Mexican-American. He was the founder of Oyala, and pretty much all the back office of Oyala was based in Guadalajara. Right now, his second business, which is called Wiseline, they're software developers for companies around the world, the largest companies. Everything is done in Guadalajara. And that's a success story of a Mexican-American with a business based in the United States, people based in Mexico, providing service, technology services around the world with Mexican talent based in Guadalajara. And of course, speaks to itself, near sourcing, right? Going back to the business people piece, we're talking about being close. We're talking about sharing the same time zones. We're talking about having the right talent. We're talking about being able to collaborate, to have the right culture, right? But the key thing here is that 25, 30 years ago, we thought of Mexico as a manufacturing country, and a manufacturing country only. That's where the term maquila comes from. And actually, in this 2020 and moving forward, from the NEPA NOAA perspective, we should not even use the term maquila. Now, these are manufacturing plants that are part of North America. Mexico advanced so much in manufacturing that it competes with any country in the world. It's not only the maquila piece, it's manufacturing plants. But more importantly, over the last 25 years, we grew in other areas to the point that we now provide finance services, including FP&A, including risk management, marketing, design, software development, customer support, human resources, consulting. So this is how Mexico has evolved over the last 25 years. From a place where you could only do manufacturing to now you can actually provide all of these other services, technologically driven services from Mexico to serve clients and companies in North America and around the world. And of course, the world is not perfect. We can say all we want that Mexico can provide services for the United States and the rest of the world, especially in this new economy, especially taking into consideration the business behaviors, the new people behaviors, and the technology that will drive the future. But regardless of who is in power, regardless of who is the president, the United States has a key election in November. Regardless of who wins, Mexico and the United States, they need to be together to come out of this better and stronger. I was very happy of the collaboration that happened over the last 5-6 months. I really was. Could it be better? Of course it could have been better. It could have been worse as well. But given the circumstances, that collaboration was there. And I do believe that in the future, both the United States and Mexico understand that the collaboration between both nations needs to be there. We are tied to the hip. Our supply chains are totally connected, and they will be more connected in the future, especially after COVID-19. So with that, Rolf, that finishes our presentation, and we can open it for questions.
Yeah, can you turn it over to me or the both of us so we can,
There you go.
there we go. Okay, we don't have any questions that have been asked by the group. I
Okay.
thought your presentation was spot on, as they would say. It's just excellent and giving us a view of the landscape that we are in today and where the landscape might take us. As you all can see, I have gray hair. So talking about the history of the maquila industry, I first started working in Mexico in 1979 when maquila was still new, having started really in 1965 with the
True.
border industrialization program. And as you mentioned, manufacturing in Mexico today is nothing like it was even in 1979 when I got started. But rather than focus on a couple of more minor points or more detail, let me broaden it out a little. You said at one point in your presentation you are a supporter of globalization, and I am too. We are looking at having a session the end of August, which will look at globalization and where it came from, where it is today, and where it is going. We came up with this idea even before coronavirus. As part of technology, you mentioned nearshoring, and certainly with the USMCA, there might be more and more a desire to think locally than globally. But
Mm-hmm.
I'd like your perspective, since you've worked with companies all over the world, where you think globalization is going today, considering coronavirus and where the virus might take us as it ends, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah. Great question, Rolf. So definitely coronavirus is pushing the regionalization of businesses. You have the Eurozone collaborating between them. You're going to have North America collaborating within. But I do not believe that that model is actually sustainable in the long run once we overcome COVID-19, because at Nepanoa, we certainly believe that we will overcome it either via a vaccine or just evolution in general. But we believe that in the midterm, regionalization of businesses will be a main factor. But in the long run, globalization will take its toll again, right? So that's why you will never hear me say that China is going to fail. You will never hear me say that China is going to lose its position as the powerhouse that it is, because there are many other factors: economic, labor, quality, price, that are simply there and can't be ignored. But given the circumstances that we're operating under right now, I do believe that there will be strong regionalization in the short and midterm, and then after that, we will start opening again into a full globalization, working with whoever is the best at their job, and that's something that this crisis will teach us, right? Who will be able to evolve, who will be agile enough to evolve into the new world. And once that happens, we will be able to collaborate on a global basis again.
It's interesting that in the case of certain industries like the auto industry,
Correct.
U.S. trade with Mexico has really been hurt a lot in that Mexico is not shipping as many finished vehicles north. We're not shipping as many parts south. So in a way, the trade deficit has actually been helped in the last couple of months with Mexico because we're shipping more than they are to us.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is an industry that has grown dramatically in Mexico in terms of investment. Almost all of the OEMs are there now.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, for that industry to come back, we need to try to reintegrate the supply chains that have been disrupted so far because of coronavirus and because of some companies not being considered essential or not. So,
Sure.
we're all looking for the auto industry to come back, and they're still, get your comments, are opportunities for tier 2s and 3s to go to Mexico from the United States. And some of this might be stimulated by USMCA. We still have to see how all of that works out.
We'll see. So that's a great comment, Ralph. Now, it also plays to the point of how we started this conversation, which was, well, the maquila industry is completely different as it is today, right? Mexico really competes from a talent perspective, from a technology perspective. And you have the example of Kia, right? Where they already raised the wages of the Mexican workers to
Right.
$16 an hour as USMCA mandate. But what I liked about that statement, when they actually, well, the action, number one, but number two, the statement that accompanied the action is that in the statement they said, I mean, why are we going to move from Mexico?
Yeah,
We have,
they're manufacturing in your hometown of Monterrey, right?
of course, but I mean, but apart from that, Rolf, it actually operates very, very well.
Yeah.
We'll pay them more. It makes no sense for us to leave and set up shop somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that tells you about the competitiveness that there is in Mexico. It's no longer a cost play only. It's a cost play plus everything else that we discussed over the last hour. And I agree with you, Ralph. I of course I'm in touch with a lot of people in the auto industry in Mexico. And the thing about Mexico right now, even though some essential industries, including the auto industry, is operating, it's that, they are a solid month to 2 months behind the United States when it comes to COVID-19, right? So what we experienced over the last month to 2 months, they're about to experience it, right? So it becomes it's been complicated from the health perspective, right? To be fully there, even though the Mexican companies are really doing a great effort of sanitizing, following the international protocols. You know how the virus behaves, right? So that's where we're at right now. That's where they're at right now. In 1 month, it may be different.
Yeah. What are your suggestions to people who contact you about an interest in going to Mexico, either from a manufacturing or a distribution basis? I mean, are you working with them on a wait and see basis to see
No.
all of this? No, just
no, not at all. Wait and see you die. No.
Right.
Yeah, no. I've actually, the clients that we're helping establish operations in Mexico. So actually, we have both. Believe it or not, Ralph, we have both scenarios. We have the scenario where we're helping clients establish operations in Mexico, and we have the scenario where we're helping businesses open the Mexican market, right? So let's start with the setup operations. We go, right? I mean, whatever we can do digital. So let's start with the incorporation of an entity. You can incorporate an entity remotely.
Oh yeah.
Right. You don't need to. You need to go down there.
Yeah.
When we talk about industrial real estate, right? You can do that remotely, and plus you have the Nepanoa team that can go with you and actually, we can go there and actually look at the sites where we need to build. The government, the local governments of the different states, they're taking the meetings remotely, and we're just negotiating, any type of benefits remotely as well. So we're actually moving forward, right, with the clients that. Now, what we're expecting, though, in our timeline is to be able to go down there and start bringing in the machines and setting up shop and hiring people. Yes, I mean, we will be able, we need to go down there at some point. But we're actually moving forward, Ralph. From a wait and see perspective, it's just, well, let's see how the virus behaves and when we can open the door to actually continue working. But from the generating business and moving forward, we're there. Now, from the market perspective, it's a similar situation, right? Because you don't just go into the market and say, hey, we're here, right? I mean, there's analysis, there's strategy behind going into the Mexico market. And that's what we're doing with businesses. We're actually analyzing the best way to get in. Now, the issue that you face there is that businesses that are usually sold on retailers, well, will those retailers be there and how are they approaching going to market? So the strategy there has shifted into, hey, why don't you sell directly via e-commerce? And taking advantage of USMCA in particular, that opens the door for small and medium-sized businesses to sell into Canada, to sell into Mexico. USMCA raised the de minimis value to $800.
Right.
Guys, I don't know about you, but I don't own many things, from my personal, stuff that are worth more than $800.
Right.
So if you're in Mexico, you can actually buy, from a company in the United States. Of course, it has to be a product manufactured in the United States that complies with the USMCA rules, etc.
Right.
But you can send to Mexico VAT free, and it goes through customs. It's expedited through customs, right? So the American businesses that we're helping them get into Mexico, that's what we're taking advantage of, which is, hey, now you have a market there. But it also goes the other way around. Now you have the small shop in Mexico that does jewelry for example, that wants to sell into the United States, now they can do that. Now they can actually go into Amazon.
Right.
An American person can click on Amazon and buy the jewelry and have it at home. Those are the little things that NAFTA didn't have, but USMCA does have, that really
Right.
opens up. And that's when we talk about the modernization of the agreement, right? That's when we talk about digital trade and e-commerce. That's the piece that it includes. It's the famous Chapter 16. That's the piece that it includes that actually makes sense for those businesses. So to your point, Ralph, no, we're actually not in the wait and see mode. We're actually, with the information that we have, yes, let's make an analysis, but it's about moving forward. Ralph, I cannot emphasize it more. Businesses that are in a wait and see mode, they will just fall behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to be driving the future. You need to keep going.
Okay. And Alberto, you will be keeping us all informed of what's going on, right?
Of course. Actually, we do have our monthly newsletter,
Right.
in which we send what Nepanoa has been up to, and also
Right.
a little perspective on different events happening in North America. But of course, we're in tune with what's happening in Mexico, not only from a business side, but I mean, as you know, Ralph, my family, all of my family is in Mexico. My wife's family is in Mexico.
Right.
So believe us, we're staying in touch on a daily basis to see how things are evolving from a business side, but also from personal side. So of course, please reach out to me in case anybody has any questions. At the last slide of the presentation, we have our social media, but if not, just send me an email. It's alberto@nepanoa.com. Pretty simple. And we would be more than glad to have a chat.
And we very much appreciate your presentation. I mean, it was very enlightening and gives us an idea of where the landscape is and what we need to do. In terms of the chamber, as you know, we had to stop our face-to-face breakfast series meetings on trade in the USMCA. Our last one was actually in December, but almost every other week now to our audience, and we probably have 800 or 900 people in our audience that we're sending updates on what is going on, important analyses, reports, and so forth, so people can keep track of that by going to our website, which is www.usmcama.org. Go to the resources page and you will see more than you'd ever think you'd see in terms of availability of resources. Coming up, our next session is going to be on Tuesday, August 4th. We're going to have Baker McKenzie, Baker Tilly, Barnes and Thornburg, and Plant Moran basically giving us an update on legal, tax, and fiscal, getting a little bit into details for companies that are already in Mexico and just need to know what's going on and where things are going to be coming up. So again, Alberto, thank you for your participation, and we thank the audience for listening. This has been recorded. So on our website and on our LinkedIn site, you'll be able to get the video and look at it again. Again, thank you very much. And everybody, please stay safe and stay well. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.